happy to introduce you all to. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background how I met this gentleman. It was actually right when I was coming out from working as a buyer for one of New York City's larger wine retailers, and I'm at a tasting, and I'm going from table to table, and when you get to each of those tables, people start telling their story. Some of it's them telling you what you want to hear. Some of it's just people with a lot of passion that really get into it, and you start really understanding who's on what side of the fence and such. And then sometimes you come to a table and someone starts telling you their story, and that story just completely just makes this huge impact on you. And then you taste the wines, and the wines make a huge impact on you. And that's when you have that perfect magic combination. And so I brought Marco on here today to tell you his story, because here we have someone who, like many of us, started as a wine lover, became a wine collector, traveled the world through wine regions, discovering what he loved and why he loved it, and then became a winemaker. But it goes even farther beyond that. Marco, thank you for joining us here. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Ready for a new challenge, as we'll see. Enjoying a little break on the beautiful Italian seaside. And very happy for your introduction, and very happy to see the interest of people around the world in my story. It's very flattering.
Oh, absolutely. No, you've definitely got a great story. But I'm sure everybody's really waiting to hear it, because, and you guys, we're going to get deep into this. But also, let me thank you for joining us he's in Sardinia right now, everybody. He's on vacation with his family, and he's taking a break from his vacation to come here today and talk with us. So thank you so much. I mean, what is the weather like in Sardinia right now?
It's wonderful. It's wonderful, sunny, a little bit windy, so you can enjoy the whole day at the beach. So taking a break of 1 hour, the beach is just 2 minutes walk from house. It was not hard.
That sounds absolutely amazing. So I'm going to really quickly put up a map for everybody to just kind of give you an idea of the area that Marco is working in. This is when the story really starts to get really interesting. So basically, Marco does live in Milan. He has been sourcing fruit from Campania, and he has been making wine on Mount Etna in Sicily with one of the true masters of winemaking who has put Sicily on the map, Frank Cornelissen. But he is also evolving beyond that. But first, let's talk about where you are in Campania, so everybody has an idea of the wines and the styles and the part of Campania that you're working in.
Yeah, I'm from the inner part of Campania, the green part that you see, Sannio, even though the grapes are sourced in the red part, Irpinia. Because Irpinia is where you have all the very famous denomination. The oldest the first denomination in south of Italy is Taurasi, and it's located in Irpinia. So I decided to start sourcing the grapes there, because I had tasted, as a wine lover, some very great wines from the 60s and 70s made by one of the best local winemakers. Some of them are very well known among wine lovers around the world. I've seen those wines on the wine list in some restaurant in New York City, for example. So I said to myself, we've been making wine here for millenniums. In the 70s and 80s, the most expensive white wines in Italy were made in Irpinia. Why shouldn't I give it a try starting from here?
Right, absolutely. Is that winemaker you're talking about, does it happen to be Mastro Berardino?
Yes, yes. Before becoming the big company we all now know very well, it was really a company's focus on outstanding quality. And imagine I got this information of them making the most expensive wines from Gianfranco Soldera, who, as you probably know, was really a great wine lover. He has a similar story because he quit the finance industry to buy a property in Montalcino. So right. We had
there are quite a few winemakers out there that started with great passion and had to locate you know, that one piece of perfect property or perfect terroir, and that also putting on their own stamp. Absolutely. You know, it's funny. I don't know if you're aware, but we actually had Piero Mastroberardino on Vinous Live a couple of months ago, and we were talking about a lot of those wines. And it is amazing because some of those vintages from the late 60s and such and the 70s, they're still beautiful today. And a lot of people didn't realize
I think the 68 Riserva is one of the best Italian wines in history. And no doubt about that. I had a blind tasting with a lot of Barolo producers, including Rinaldi, Mascarello. They are all friends, and they were convinced it was a great Barolo from the 90s, while actually it was an Aglianico from the 60s.
No, Aglianico is definitely very special grape, and not enough people give it credit, but in the same token, not enough people have really been able to show the world what it's capable of. But that's
the point.
That's what we're here to do now, right?
And to go to the next step, wine Sicily. You see, not being a winemaker has a lot of disadvantages in the fact that you don't have a vineyard, you don't have a cellar, you have to start everything from scratch. But on the other side, you have an advantage. You have a very open mind. You know a lot as a wine lover. I've traveled the world and visited hundreds of producers. So I wanted to do something that was becoming not the standard, but a strong reality elsewhere. While in Campania, surprisingly, nobody wanted to go that route. And this is why, funny enough, I started with Cornelissen. Because today he's a star, but 20 years ago, he was no one. I just bumped into him because I was visiting other producers on the Etna, and a guy working at Cotta Nera, which is a totally different kind of company, told me, oh, but if you like those kind of wines, you should visit this crazy Belgian guy in Solicchiata. He only does 2,000 bottles and makes something different. So back at the time, I was a bit fed up with all the Campania producers doing the same style of vinification. And so I met with Frank and decided to explore that kind of winemaking.
Well, let's backtrack just a little bit, because I also kind of want to know where this all started, because one of the things that I find really, really interesting about you, and everybody that's watching, I'm going to start flashing some of the pictures that Marco sent me, some really great pictures as we're talking here as well. But also, if you have any questions for him as we keep on moving on, do send them to me and I'll weave them into the conversation as we go. But so Marco, I mean, let's just start from the beginning, because one thing I think is really cool is that you really started out the same way as many of our readers and our viewers started out, as just as a wine lover, wine collector. I'd really like to get an idea of like where that started and how that developed. Was wine in your family when you were younger?
No, not at all. Actually, not at all. And when I grew up in Campania, we were not drinking regularly. And when I tried local wines, I was never satisfied, and I never understood why people got so excited about wine. Right. And then when I turned 18 and I visited a couple of friends in Tuscany, and they brought me to Nenoteca, and we started drinking great French wines and Brunello. I said, oh.
No,
sorry.
So just a picture I wanted to put up there of you in the vineyard.
Yeah. This is Massal selection in Taurasi. We will get there afterwards. But basically, I realized there were phenomenal wines. And I said, oh, now I understand why people go crazy about wine. I want to explore that. And then living in Milano was very nice, because in 1 hour, 20 minutes, you are in Barolo, Barbaresco. 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, you are in Valpolicella. 3 hours and a half, you are in Friuli.
And how old were you at this time, though? When you really first started exploring, how old were you at this point?
18.
18 years old.
I started very early. I remember visiting Mascarello as one of the first winemakers, and didn't have money to actually buy the Barolo after the tasting. So I was going back home with a bottle of Dolcetto. or Freisa, which I really like. But it was there that I started to be eager to know more and to understand what's behind winemaking, what's behind that bottle.
So Barolo Mascarello was a huge influence on you and your interest in wine?
Yes, yes, definitely. Because back at the time, if you remember, if you take a book of the late 90s, everyone, the world was dominated by one single style. Everyone, I think, since everyone was trying to go toward the Bordeaux style wine. So everybody tried to make this wine more smooth with the taste of barrique. This happened all the way through Italy, from Piedmont to Taurasi. And so I was sitting in a restaurant and saw this label with a wonderful lady, and underneath there was written Big Barrel, and awful lady, and underneath was written Barrique. So I said, who is this crazy guy? I had to know him. And I went to visit him. And a new world had opened, because he was not just a great winemaker, he was really a visionary. He really gave me the idea of what is winemaking and how this industry, let's call it industry, moves throughout decades. I think having the picture of the wine world in a very long-term perspective helps you a lot, a lot.
So from Barolo, where did you go?
Oh, then Rhone was 4 hours drive. Burgundy was 4.5 hour drive, depending on the style of driving. But for a Napolitan is 4.5 drive. So it was 10 years of continuous visit. Until 2001, I was in Sicily, where I used to spend a lot of virtually every weekend. I would flew to Sicily because I fell in love with this wonderful Sicilian lady. So I was visiting her in Catania, which is, this is the symbol of Catania, as you can see. Those memories are amazing. And rather than staying in her city, we took a car and drove to Marsala, which is 4 hour drive, just to visit the Bartoli. 4 hours drive plus 4 hours on the way back. We were visiting all the producers in Sicily, restaurants, because food is also 50% of the fun, or 49. And then I bumped into Frank. I really liked Frank because he had a clear idea of where he wanted to go, and we had a genuine willingness to explore the world of spontaneous fermentation and this wonderful world that today is well recognized by all the wine lovers. But I can tell you, 20 years ago, we were wine freaks. Huh?
Well, and that's really part of the opportunity that you had, is that it was the time that you came into this. The fact that, you know, coming into wine, being a wine lover, being a food lover, that you were able to spend the time with these giants in the wine world that are, you know, people who are giants today. But you knew them as they were making great wine before everybody was, you know, buying it out, and the secondary market was making it skyrocket in price.
And that's why my cellar is amazing, because I bought this wine for very, very cheap money, ridiculous money, ridiculously low, I mean.
Oh yeah. No, I always think it's funny. I do have a very dear friend who I taste with often, and he will very often bring a bottle of something like a Barolo Mascarello or something like that, Barolo, and it'll have like a $35 price tag on it.
Yes. But still today, Rinaldi sells me the bottle for 35 euros.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absolutely amazing. So okay, so you meet Frank, and you guys become friends. You're interested in wine.
I start buying his wine a lot. And sharing his wine with my friends in Milano and wine lover across Europe. Because
were you dabbling in winemaking at all at this point? Were you dabbling in winemaking? Were you experimenting at all in winemaking?
No. And but I really liked the concept of amphora, not to give the taste of the wood to the wine and blah blah blah. And so after a couple of years, visiting friends and Franks and sharing the wine passion with him. I said, Frank, why don't we start making one amphora of Aglianico? I will take care of the vineyard because obviously vineyard is still the most important part, no?
Yeah. This is I just wanted to show your label here.
Yeah, the black. Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. The black holes is the neck of the amphora, which is digged underground. It's a label by two artists from my village. They are great. They do amazing stuff with paper mache techniques. It's an actual work that I have in my house. But anyway, I said, why don't we start with an amphora of Aglianico? I will take care of the vineyard and you do the vinification. I bring the grapes with a little truck. It's a 6-7 hour drive from Taurasi to Etna, plus the ferry. And we start from here. And it was really fun because I had, not being a winemaker, I had total freedom as to try with different pruning, different harvesting, timing of the harvesting, different skin contact. We really just wanted to explore without boundaries and with very open-minded. We had a clear idea of where we wanted to go. Leroy and those kind of producers were our guiding light, and but we were really free. And I think this is why many people not from the wine industry, when they join the wine industry, realize something really nice and good, because out of passion, you are free. And since you're making a living out of another job, you can really experiment something new.
Well, I actually just wanted to put this up really quick because you mentioned how you transport the grapes. So he's literally transporting the grapes from Campania to Sicily in refrigerated truck, which, you got to realize that to some people, this sounds like, oh my God, how is that possible? But the reality is, everybody, that this is something that happens in many, many regions around the world where the winery is not right there on the plot of land where the fruit's being harvested, and they need to rely on something like this. What I think is also really cool is that as we were talking, Marco and I, about making today's event happen, he sent me a video of himself escorting the truck on motorcycle, so he would actually be able to make sure that his fruit went from Campania to Sicily intact, which I think is really
especially when it had to arrive in Milano, because in Sicily it's okay, small village is not difficult to find a winery. But in Milan, just to anticipate that then after 10 years I moved to Milan. I opened my own winery in Milan. When the truck arrives in Milan, it's not easy to drive the truck to the exact spot because you are actually in the city.
Well, okay, so I guess the big question I have is that what was it that made you, obviously you're from Campania, correct? So what drew you to the locations that you ended up picking the grapes from? And why didn't you think to maybe work with somebody in Campania to make the wine there?
Very easy. First, the location, I told you. I just started where I thought I could make an amazing wine, and just because I had tasted both Mastro Berardino, but also I think some other producers lack consistency because they are not obsessed with quality. And they just keep making the wine as a hobby, but sometimes they show very good wines. And so I've always thought that area where those amazing wines were born could give me the chance of making great wines. And guess what? This vineyard is just less than a mile away from Mastro Berardino made his amazing 68 Riserva. So it was easy to start, to pick the location where to start.
So
why Campania? Sorry?
The Montemarano vineyard?
Yes, Montemarano vineyard. This is
and how large is Montemarano?
Yeah, in Montemarano, yes.
But how large is this vineyard? You're saying that you're about a mile away from that wine where it was produced.
Yes, this vineyard is a little bit less than 1 hectare.
Mm-hmm.
8,000 square meters, which probably is what? Times 3, 24,000 square foot. I don't know if you use this measurement, but
No,
let's say
absolutely.
you make 4,000, 5,000 bottles if you take the whole one. Obviously, I started with different pruning on different rows, and I vinified different batches. It was really interesting. And
Well,
why, Frank? Because back at the time, nobody had such a clear focus on spontaneous yeast fermentation and neutral recipient. There was a guy doing something similar, but he was using also barrique.
right.
So for me, it was a bit of a waste, of a shame. Why are you doing such a great? But let me make this point very clear. Barrique is absolutely fine and amazing. Most of the wines I love, from Burgundy to Rhone, are made in barrique. It's just a different art that you have to be good enough to master before being able to use a barrique. So there's nothing wrong. We are talking about barrique as a tool used 20 years ago to give a special taste and attach a special label to the wine. Just as today many people can use the amphora or the organic or biodynamic word, and then they are not genuinely convinced in what they're doing. So Frank offered me the chance to do something really close to what I had in mind. And then lastly, since I was living in Milan and dating with this girl in Sicily, I was very often in Sicily and not in Campania. So I said, okay, I'm here 30 weekends at least per year. I spend my summer here. It's easier for me, so I have to travel only one place so I can see my girlfriend, my fiancé, and my wine, rather than traveling to 2 different regions.
And then what about the farming side of it? So you're living in Milan, so you can't be there in the vineyard every day. You know, how did you find the people that you could trust to farm the wine for you?
That's the most important part, but I think it's pretty much the same in every business, no? Even if you run a big corporation, finding the right partners is the key to succeed, because you cannot control everything and you have to delegate. It was not easy. It took me 2 years to find a farmer that was willing to do what I had in mind. But for me, really, the most important part is having a clear idea of where you want to get with the farming side. So I've been one of the first one in Campania to go the organic path, to work on the pruning. Since we have this very long cordon and this very big pergola, the most important part for me was to prune aggressively the shoots and the vines and lose 50 or even more % of the theoretical production in order to get a richer fruit, a more complex fruit, and a fruit that would get ripe no matter of the weather condition, because this is a very important factor. We are the last one to harvest in Italy. We harvest in November. So you start having trouble with bad weather, a lot of rain. So it's very hard to bring Aglianico to perfect ripeness. And I think this is the #1 reason why Aglianico has not gained a big reputation on the market, is because working with high yields, you don't always get to perfect ripeness, and so you don't find consistency of the final product throughout every vintage. So having this strong concept in mind and being 100% committed to these key ideas was more important than finding the right farmer, because in the end, once you find a farmer that is willing to prune the way you want to prune, that is willing to use the product you want to use when you do the treatment, which is only copper and the other stuff that you use in organic. I also trying to replace copper with clay to reduce the amount of copper we use. So once you set the standards, you just need to find someone you can trust and that will do the job you want.
So now obviously you couldn't call it Terrassi because you were making the wine on Etna. But was that something that you had wanted to do, or is that something that you had ever explored the possibility of doing? Or are you happy to continue on with basically having a fantasy label?
Well, honestly, if I think about the history of Terrassi and what a great wine it was, and I come from Campania, it would be a pleasure for me. But if I think about when I started, I really did not identify myself with other producers. So I didn't really care about it that much. And also because back at the time, my wine was completely different from all other Terrassi. Nowadays, luckily enough, I see more and more producers embracing the organic story, low intervention in the cellar, blah blah blah. So I have a lot of friends in the winemaking industry in Terrassi, and we'll try to make this name more popular in a nice way, let's say. So I might think about it.
Right. Well, especially now, because I mean, this is coming more toward the, as our conversation moves on, but you have or in the middle of building a winery now in Campania. And so there will come a time that you legally can call it Terrassi,
Exactly.
or make another wine called Terrassi.
Exactly. And also because, as you know, I want to start with the grapes from the other nice area that I think we have in Campania, the Sannio. And in Sannio, we also make as a red Aglianico. It's a different kind. Mm-hmm. There are three kinds of Aglianico. Taurasi, Taburno, which is Sannio, and Vulture, which is another region, Basilicata, which is smoother, and that's why I think it's more popular in the US or elsewhere than Taburno. Taburno is more dry, more mineral, more similar to Barolo, I think. But you don't really have, this is Taburno. It's interesting to see that there's a very rocky soil, completely different from Taurasi. You also have mountains in Terrassi. So even if we are in Campania in the south, these are wines made on the mountains. And this is why I love them, because they have the richness of the sun of the south, but with the elegance of the freshness of the mountains. I think it's a wonderful combination. But Terrassi area is
volcanic. You mentioned that it reminds you quite a bit of Cornas. When you say that.
I love you, Eric. This is what I keep telling to Thierry Alemand. I want him to come and visit me because Aglianico is the same family in terms of grape varietals, same family as Syrah. Mm-hmm. We found a Syrah vine on Taburno, on this mountain here, 500 years old. And the soil is the same. I think it's the same. So I started trying some vinification of these grapes, and the result is just something I love. So from this year, I will make this regularly, because when I was at Frank, I could only make one amphora or two. When I started my winery in Milano, I had 42 square meters. So just a parking lot for two big cars. And now I have a 300 square meter winery, so I can do a red and a white from Sannio, the area we just saw, while keeping the Ognostro story, which is Aglianico from Taurasi, and Fiano from the Fiano area, which
is everybody.
Yes.
Okay. And so before we get into the project today, I want to talk about the wine that really caught my eye the first time we talked to you, and because I was tasting with a Campania producer, and I was tasting a wine that was named Last Trip Sicily. If you tell us a little bit about this wine and just the time period when this wine came around, your kind of like your evolution from Sicily to Milan.
Yes,
or northern Italy, I should say.
Yeah, this was the last vintage that I brought to Sicily. It was a very tough vintage right from the beginning. We had a lot of troubles in the vineyard. Yeah, I want to flag the stain of ink on the label, which is a kind of link to the name of the wine,
Right.
which means ink
Right.
in Napolitan dialect.
Right. Exactly.
So I wanted to make a very simple label with a strong statement. Hey guys, this is the last wine I'm making in Sicily. So enjoy it, because the next year I will be making my own wines somewhere else. Let's get there afterwards, because I didn't start from Milano the next day, but I made the wine, as you know, somewhere else in Barolo. So I wanted to give a message. At the same time, I was not 100% happy with the result in the vineyards. And at the same time, I was not so happy the way I had to move to the next vintage. So I didn't really have time to organize myself and open the winery in Milano. But Frank had some trouble at his winery. And so in 10 days, in 1 week actually, I had to find another place to make my wine. Thank goodness I have a lot of friends that are winemaker. And after taking and I started making wine in Monforte d'Alba at Cascina Fontana, this amazing Barolo producer.
Fontana, absolutely.
So because of all of this, first of all, because I was not happy with the vintage, and I think Ognostro has a standard of quality, and I thought that wine didn't meet that standard, which doesn't mean it's not good. I actually have some clients that prefer that wine because it's more light body. It totally is. And it's more enjoyable in the short term, no? So
right, absolutely.
Actually, my US importer told me I need at least 600 cases of this wine every year. Please, can you do that for me?
Just got to keep on driving back and forth to Sicily and making the next to last.
No, I can make it myself, but with a little bit less ripe and concentrated grapes, let's say. Right. So, you know, you can really decide the style of your wine in the vineyard. You just leave more grapes on the tree and you have a more light wine.
So before we move on completely from Sicily, I have a little bit of a wine geek question for you. So I'm just thinking about Sicilian wine now, sulfur-wise. Now you're working with Frank, so was he adding sulfur to your wine?
Yes, I wanted to.
Okay.
I mean, it was a negotiation with Frank. I've always tried to do a wine a little bit more my style compared to Frank's style. Also because we were working with different grape varietals. Totally. But I couldn't tell Frank, you do this, you do that, you do that. Otherwise, you know his personality. He would have kicked me out the next day.
Right.
But on SO2, I wanted to add that, because I don't think the way he works with his wine, I mean, he goes in bottle way before myself, because Nerello is more like, but it's different. So for Nerello, it worked. For me, I do 3 years aging. And in the end, I was adding 2-3 grams every 100 liters. So
right. Well, I mean, that's the thing.
I made some batches without SO2 for myself. And I can tell you, my perception is that by adding such a small amount of SO2 after the fermentation is finished, because this is where I draw the line. I want a grape to do a spontaneous yeast fermentation without adding 1 single gram, because if you add 1 gram, you will kill something. Okay, you will kill some yeast. We might argue, oh, you kill the bad yeast, the good yeast. I don't care. I want the wine that stems from the grapes that specific year, full stop. When everything is finished, if you add 1 or 2 grams, I add 1 gram for the red and 1.5 for the white. You are maybe losing 5% of smell and the seductive aspect of no SO2 wine, but you're gaining 50% with the stability of the wine, precision, and blah, blah, blah. So this wine has 2.5 grams every 100 liters of SO2.
You're talking about the Bianco.
The Bianco. So nothing. If you speak to an enologist, this is nothing.
Yeah.
In Italy, someone takes joke of me because they say you add the gram of the fear, they call it, no? Because,
but you know, the reality is a lot of people don't realize that these wines, they need to travel and such. And don't get me wrong, I am a big fan of these, you know, these truly natural wines with spontaneous fermentation, completely neutral vessel or amphora aging, and then no sulfur added. They're great when they're great, but when they're not, they are. And it could be the same wine, same everything. It's just that bottle, you know, it just didn't have the protection, and so it ended up spoiling.
You got the point spot on. And this is the same that applies to conventional wine, to barrique wines. There are good wines and bad wines. I think that the discussion in between natural wines, conventional wine is largely overestimated. Wine lovers around the world know that they can find amazing wine no matter where, no matter the style, no matter the recipient. We don't care. We just like good wines. And I think this is the future of the wine industry.
So beyond the sulfur level, though, can you tell us a little bit more about the Bianco? Because we've heard about the Rosso, but you know, tell us a little bit more about this wine, because this wine certainly turned my head as well.
Yes, I'm very proud of this wine because it was the first batch of grapes that I brought to the Milan winery. So imagine all this story that the natural wine geek will tell you about the yeast in the winery, the wonderful air of their mountains affecting the fermentation in the winery, in the cellar. So I was a bit scared because actually I had just restructured and refurbished a parking lot in the city of Milan. Everything was brand new. The painting on the walls, all the equipment was brand new. So I think there was not a single yeast in my cellar. And the air was the Milan polluted air. So I said to myself, oh, there's no way this white will bring the whole fermentation to the end. I called a friend who runs a winery 1 hour drive from Milan, and I said, oh, get ready, because if the fermentation doesn't start, I will come and take 20 liters of your fermenting must and add it to my wine, because rather than using selected yeast, I would rather use someone else's grapes, just a little bit, and to start the fermentation. But guess what? I pressed the grapes, and the next day the magic happened, and it went all the way. It went all the way through in a very smooth way. And so it was the magic happening in Milano after what, 12 years traveling to Sicily, to Montfort. It was amazing. And then when it comes to the wine, I still remember the first time you tried and you asked me, why haven't I tasted this wine before? And I said, because it's the first time that I put it on the market. I'm very proud of this because making a white is way more complicated than making a red. And I think that especially with the white, you can see what does mean being free to experiment and to go ahead with no compromise. I can tell you that maybe 0.01% of whites on the market are made without yeast, without temperature control, and without SO2 during the fermentation phase.
So, but this entire time, so you had your experience with Frank, you've been learning from him. First vintage was 07, correct?
Yes, yes.
2007 is your first vintage, and you're now on the 17?
The 17 is on the market.
It's on the market. So 10 years working basically. Well, the last trip to Sicily is your 16, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 10 years because you count 2007 and 16, even if it's 9 years, but including the starting and the end point is 10 vintages.
But now, so the producers in Piedmont and the way that they're managing their vineyards and such, and the way they're making their wines, is this influencing you at this point? Are you starting to feel like, you know, you're forming your own style as you're learning from other people?
No, definitely my style. That's why I'm very proud of the 18, and I can't wait for you to taste the 18. Although I must confess that in 17, when I worked at Cascina Fontana, he treated me. I always said that the best thing that can happen in Italy, we say a door will close and a gate will open, because Mario said, "What's the problem, Marco? Bring the grapes to my winery, but you take care of yourself. I don't want to be involved in any decision because it's your wine, and I want you to take each and every decision." And this was the best thing, because really I had to deal with my opinion. And obviously we had discussion with Mario, but I would also take sample and go to Mascarello, Rinaldi, or Busso, or Bondoni, all these producers that are a good friend of mine, and asking for suggestion. But it's something very close to my style. Unfortunately, the 17 was a very warm vintage. The wine is 15.5% alcohol, so, which is something that
can get there very easily.
Yeah, it's something that never happened. Of course, I like to think that the freshness and the acidity of the Aglianico balances out this strong alcoholic note. But 18 is more fresh, and also 18 I was using my own equipment, and I learned something from everyone, really. So in Piedmont, I learned how to work in a more elegant way with a wine that has such a strong tannins. I think the structure of Nerello is very different from Aglianico, while Aglianico is more similar to Barolo and to Syrah. So talking to Thierry Aleman, talking to Mario has led me to my own personal style. Yeah.
And then all the while, you know, you're in Milan at this point, so you have grapes that are basically being shipped to you on a regular basis to check for their quality, to see how your wines are doing. But as these are being sent to you, and you're deciding what you want to do with them, and where they are and the instructions you're giving, you're also thinking about how great it would be as grapes being sent to him for his quality assurance. You're also thinking how great it would be if you were there on the ground in Campania, correct? And able to actually be within the vines and making your wine there. And that's how the new winery in Campania started to come about.
Yes, obviously, initially I was managing one single vineyard in Montemarano. So I just said the farmer going through the vineyard, picking grapes, packing them, and send it over with next day delivery to assess whether the grapes were ripe for the picking. Because I decide everything from the picking to every racking, punch down, pumping over, open, giving air to the mast just by tasting. This doesn't mean I don't run analysis. I spend a lot of money running analysis because I want to know where my wine is going and how the values of the different characteristics of wines are: acidity, volatile alcohol, blah, blah, blah. But I want to taste everything. So back at the time, it was easy for me to get one box shipped. Now Ognostro is made out of a blend of two vineyards, because I bought a second vineyard in Castelfranci, opposite to where I am. So I have two vineyards, one facing northeast and one facing southwest. This will help me in getting I think a more balanced grape throughout, no matter the weather condition, because we all know that lately the weather conditions are becoming more extreme. No, very rainy, 16 very rainy, 17 extremely warm, 18 again rainy, 19 fantastic vintage. So I want to do like the Barolo producer do, a blend of different
vineyards, finding balance.
And so it's for the wine. So it would become now very difficult for me to get 4 packages shipped to send people around all of these vineyards. Yeah. And also, I don't have the space in Milano, and the space in Milano is very expensive. But right. More importantly, after having worked 10 years in the vineyard and knowing what was important for me, and 3 years in the winery, I realized this is my life. This is what I want to do for the next part of my life. And the real reason is that I just feel happy when I'm at the cellar making my wine and shipping around the world and seeing people and see these things happening and seeing people.
It sounds like you've really come full circle. That's the greatest thing about this entire story, is that you really have come full circle, and we kind of caught you right at that moment where you're arriving. I just put up this photo you had sent me about. This is one of the newer parcels that you started to work with, correct?
Well, this is my neighbor.
Okay.
And I think this is very important to show why I have something very similar, except that I don't put tomatoes underneath
right.
the vineyard.
Right.
But it's very similar because this is a pergola, and I bought a pergola that is 70 to 90 years old. But when people ask me why pergola is so common in Campania, you have to think that we are in the middle of the Italy, in between mountains, very difficult to go around little roads. We are in the middle of nowhere, basically. And we were poor people. We still are, but back then it was even worse, 100 years ago. So we have the lowest average size of farms in Italy, an average of 2.53 hectares, where the farmer had to get every kind of product, oil, vegetables, wine, food for their animals, the cow, the pigs, and blah, blah, blah. So they trained the grapes at pergola so that the vines will grow very high, and they will plant tomatoes, zucchini, pumpkins, and broccoli underneath the vineyard. So I'm keeping the pergola because I think it's you cannot touch a 90 years old vineyard, but obviously I don't want to suck out energy from the soil.
Right. Oh, totally. But so now you're doing replanting, but you're replanting through massal selection from older vineyards that you've acquired.
Yes, the picture you showed before was me taking the shoots from an old pergola, and you can see how long those shoots are. They are incredibly long. You will never see such long shoots rather than in a pergola. And I'm using those to work with the local vines that are meant and are good to thrive and prosper in those areas. But I'm planting Guyot because I'm convinced that, yes, this is my brand new vineyard that I just planted in April. And it was so fun because it was throughout the COVID pandemic. So I was in Milan and the guy was in the vineyard in Campania, and we kept chatting and sending pictures. I want you to go this way. It was really crazy. But this is the final result. It's the vineyard probably with the highest density in Campania. But not because I think that the higher the density, the better the wine. I really believe that, as Madame Leroy said, every vineyard has its own balance, that it doesn't have a formula. But I think that working with lower yields per single vine will help me in getting that magic balance of ripeness, freshness, acidity in different weather conditions.
I actually have a question here that I think is really, really kind of cool. I hope you can help out here. But it's a little complex. Someone's asking, so if you have any advice for anyone that may be stateside that dreams of making wines in Italy, on how they might get started, considering how long and hard of a journey you've had through this. So what would be your advice to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps and start making wine in Italy?
Well, if he is a wine lover and has a wide knowledge of wine, he has two options. Either making a wine for the sake of making something that he likes and enjoys, or if he wants to make a living out of it, he should also take into the equation what is the market for that kind of wine. Just to give you an example, when Frank moved to Etna, one of the factors that affected his decision was that the cost of the land there was 10,000, 20,000 euro per hectare, which is, you can amortize that in 1 year. If you were to move in Barolo today, the cost is 2 million. So if you are a billionaire, fine, doesn't matter.
Right.
If you have to make a living and you are not a billionaire, think about also the economic factor, because this is a business. Sorry if I call it business, but if you want to make a living out of it, it is a business.
You can't support your family if you didn't work to make money.
No, my dream is not to make, is to make a decent living out of it.
Of course,
but
of course. No,
you
please,
have to invest a lot, buy the land, plant the vineyard. You all have all the costs upfront, and so you really need time to get where you want. But in terms of wine and product, for me, the reason why I think Ognostro has its own place in the market is because no matter where I made it, no matter which recipient, and I can tell you I tried almost all of them, and I have a strong idea now on what to use, because I used everything over the past 10 years, except the barrique, obviously, is to have a clear idea of where you want to go, which wine you want to get, why you want to focus on that specific area or on that specific grape varietal, and stick to that idea. Of course, you will not get exactly where you thought,
right?
But this will guide you, because the number of decisions you have to take is enormous. It's really enormous.
No, it's something that, you know, if you're a billionaire, you can go to Barolo and possibly get someone to start making some wine with you, but otherwise, you know, you have to consider that there are some great locations all around Italy. If you are able.
My region, the cost of the land is really low,
right?
And
exactly.
you can also start without committing too much capital, like I did. You can start by renting a vineyard, and you can start by outsourcing the vinification if you find someone that you really trust.
I mean, do you plan on staying in Milan, or are you moving to Campania at this point?
I will leave. I will travel back and forth, because I'm not changing the life of my family. I have three kids.
Oh, I understand completely.
And I have a guy that works with me in the vineyard who is amazing. So I'm really 100% convinced that my effort in the vineyard can be really low. I can work a few weeks throughout the year because I have this amazing guy. And this year I'm going to make the wine for him, because I want him to start his own wine venture, because he's amazing. I don't have time to go through this, but the vinification only takes 2.5 months. So I can be there and in that specific time. And I've been in the office 10 hours a day for my entire life. I can be 10, 12 weeks in Campania, traveling back and forth to see my family.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, we do to follow our passions and to and also take care of our families. That's for sure. That's what we do. So, from a winemaking standpoint, has anything changed when it comes to, you know, what you were doing with Frank versus what you're doing now? I mean, should we expect some
of course, because yes, because at the beginning we wanted to experiment, so we did months of skin contact, no SO2 or a bit of SO2, and especially the way Frank worked, we did a lot of punch downs, which for Nerello worked really well because you want to extract. Now I'm pretty much on the opposite end because Aglianico has so much material inside, solid part, that you want to be very gentle to the cap. And so I bought a peristaltic pump. I almost don't do punch down. I only do punch down before the fermentation starts, and that's it. So I'm way more gentle with the cap and with the extraction. And that's why I think the wines today have a better balance, because they have the energy and the structure of Aglianico, but they are more elegant.
But sticking with amphora,
also be more, you can see this in the 2018 red coming in the US by the year end. And also I quit clay. I now work with ceramic because it gives a good oxygenation, but for 18 months aging, it doesn't give any smell. It's perfect. I use concrete and ceramic amphora, a mix of ceramic and clay.
And that vintage, the first vintage to start using that would be 18?
Yes, the 18 will be a mix of concrete and ceramic. But since a ceramic amphora has the same cost of a 10 times larger concrete tank, it will take time for me to move to a completely amphora, ceramic amphora, to a wine made completely in ceramic amphora.
No, it's very cool. Like I said, you've really come full circle since the beginning here, and it's really exciting to think what might be coming from your winery down the road. That's for sure.
There is massive selection and new vineyards, new area to be explored. I think over the next 10 years, I will be one of the most busy person in the wine industry.
How much longer before that new vineyard just replanted, you can start sourcing fruit from there?
The way I work, since I don't use chemical, right? Because some people do chemical in the first 3 years because they say, oh, you're not selling any great wine, so go ahead. No. So they will grow very slowly. I think 3-4 years, and then add 2-3 years to make the wine. So we will be tasting the first wine from the new vineyard I planted this year in 7-8 years.
Wow.
And we will be tasting the Fiano made in the Sannio or in 10 years time. But in the meantime, I have rented some little vineyards, so you will get some preview of what I have in mind beforehand.
And about how large is your production at this point?
Last year was 7,500 bottles,
right?
Which is aside. Sorry.
We're not talking large production here, that's for sure.
No. This year, since I have larger space, I'm going to move to 10, 12,000. You know, if you want to keep consistency and deliver something, same level of quality, and I do everything handmade and I taste only, you need time to select the vineyard, the people, as we said before, because if you want to rent, you have to tell someone that you are going to use the scissors in his vineyard and you are cutting aggressively his vineyard. So you have to find the person that is willing to put the trust in you. Luckily enough, now Agnostro is well known in the area, so it's easier for me someone. But just to give you an idea, when I started reducing the clusters on the vineyard, the farmer with whom I started was digging and hiding the cluster that I throw underground to avoid the neighbors seeing what we were doing, because it was a shame.
Well, yeah, it is an amazing story. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I just wanted to say first, thank you to Marco for coming on here. But I also wanted to thank everybody who tuned in and watched. What I think is really cool about this story is Marco talks about how he came full circle to coming to develop the wine he has today and how he learned from all of these great winemakers before they were considered great winemakers. And I certainly urge you to go out, find these wines and taste them and make the decision for yourself. But, this may be one of those winemakers that 10 or 20 years from now, we're trying to figure out how we could possibly find those bottles. So Marco, thank you.
No.
No, well, you never know. Thank you.
No, because I will provide one bottle to everyone.
Oh, we're going to hold you to that.
No, I promise.
Thank you
Keep
again.
the record of this Zoom.
On this
I
recording.
promise.
I've got you down. We all do.
I promise.
Ciao, Marco.
You will always get at least 1 or 2 bottles from me, all of you.
Thank you, Marco.
Because I'm a wine lover, first of all.